I want to introduce our next panel, or at least Brian, and I'll let him introduce everyone else. Brian is the first editor-in-chief of Edible Manhattan, Brooklyn, East End, Long Island. He's a co-founder of Food Loves Tech. He does a bunch of stuff in this space, and I'm excited for the conversation he's going to have today about health. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Lauren. And thanks, everyone, for being here. This is very exciting to be at our third Food Loves Tech. Welcome back to those who've been supporters and panelists before, Health-Ade, Gramercy Tavern, and also to new friends. You know, when we at Edible Magazine embarked a few years ago to start writing about technology moving into the food chain, we did it because we saw that there was the same enthusiasm and investment and interest as there was in eating local and eating regional 10 or 20 years ago. But what we also realized was that technology was set up to scale and move really quickly, faster than farmers markets and CSAs could move. And so maybe technology could be a good partner in scaling up good food systems. But we weren't ready to just accept that. I mean, of course, agriculture has got some really bad experiences with technology as well. So we wanted to ask the question, is technology coming into the food system helping us eat better, and is it helping us grow food better? And if we can answer those two questions, then yes, I think we can be supportive of smart devices and connected devices and AI and all sorts of innovative approaches moving into what we eat and how we farm. And so we've got actually a really interesting diversity of representatives from the food chain here. And I wanted to start out, since we're focusing on health innovations, I wanted to quickly go down the line and introduce everyone and have them, rather than tell their whole story, which I think we'll get to, tell the audience, tell us about the one particular thing you do that you're most excited about. Maybe it's a program you have in designing meals for sick people at home. Maybe it's a new company you're launching. Maybe it's how you're trying to change culinary medicine. Because I think it'll give a sense of the diversity of approaches, both behavioral and economic and policy-wise. So let's start with Kate Kollmann, who's the organic grain and dairy buyer for General Mills, including Cascadian Farms, Annie's, and all the organic brands under the General Mills family. Kate, when we were talking, you were telling me about the Kernza project that you're investing heavily in, which is basically to develop a perennial grain, not a grain that's harvested every year, so less fertilizer, less damage to the soil, but we're very early on with that. So can you tell me about why you're excited about the Kernza project?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So in my work with Cascadian Farm and the other natural and organic brands in our portfolio, there's been a large focus and really investment in regenerative agriculture. And the three pillars of that we've identified are soil health, and above and below ground biodiversity, and then resilient farming communities. And so Kernza, which is a perennial wheatgrass, fits really nicely kind of into all three of those. It's a grain that farmers can grow and develops an incredibly deep root system, which is really good for water retention, so helps farmers through times of drought and other resiliency aspects of that. And so that's very beneficial to the farmer income and to soil health in general. And then it doesn't need to be tilled up, so you can put it in the ground and harvest it year after year, and then the farmers can sell that. And so it's a very tasty grain as well that we are working to incorporate into our products. It was one of those projects that we knew we needed to invest in Kernza, and then we made the commitment to do that. And now we're figuring out how to put it in the products. Right. Whereas traditionally it would be, we need this in our product, let's go find out how to put it in the ground. So it's been really exciting. There's been so much momentum and excitement about the potential of Kernza to sequester carbon out of the atmosphere and put it back into the soil through its deep root system. So as we talk about things like climate change and rural landscapes and the ag system, it's a tool within our toolbox to really change the landscape and change the way we think about the grains that we're growing.
And the theme of this panel is new sort of new allies in the in the effort to eat better, I would say. I mean, we talk about doctors and nurses kind of getting off the sidelines and giving food advice first, or chefs getting active and saying, is it really healthy to eat a big piece of steak every night? And so naturally, working Kernza into the landscape, then ultimately it's a new ingredient in our diet as well, right? But you're still figuring out exactly where it's going to show up. And just for those following at home, this is all the effort of the Land Institute in Kansas for the last 30 plus years. They've been trying to like reverse agricultural evolution and see, can we go back to some sort of perennial grain that doesn't have to be fertilized and harvested every single year. So jumping along to more of the beverage category, we have Amelia Winslow, who's with Kombucha Health-Ade, one of the nation's largest kombucha producers based in Los Angeles. I had the pleasure of visiting your plant. It's sort of glass jars stacked to the ceiling as far as the eye can see. What can you tell us about your role at Health-Ade, and in particular, Health-Ade's interest in preserving kombucha as a healthy drink, as opposed to, there's some interesting politics going on with kombucha right now.
Yeah, so normally when I am speaking to a group, I first ask, who's heard of kombucha? But I feel like because we're in Brooklyn, I can kind of skip over that. But yeah, kombucha is a fermented tea, and the base of it is 4 ingredients that you need. It's water, tea, sugar, and a culture. And the culture is called a SCOBY, a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. And it looks like a blob, like a jellyfish kind of a thing, that you put into a jar of sweet tea and let it culture over time. And really what has made Health-Ade different is that we continue to brew in 2.5-gallon glass jars. So if you're looking at, a kombucha case in a grocery store, you're seeing that all these kombuchas are bottled in glass, but they're not brewed in glass. They're brewed in largely plastic or stainless steel. And because kombucha is a very acidic beverage, our goal has been to preserve the taste and the authenticity, and also to prevent plastic and metal leaching by continuing to brew in glass jars. So as Brian mentioned, we have grown really fast. We're 6 years old, but even since, in January of this year, we were producing 40,000 cases a week, and now we're producing 80,000 cases a week. So we've grown a lot, but it's the challenges that we face are largely internal. How do we continue to scale this model of brewing in 2.5-gallon glass jars? Literally, we brew the same way you would brew at home. So,
and each of those jars has their own little mother
they
floating
have
on
their own
top.
culture, and
But,
they.
And just to jump right in, I mean, if you look at the other brands on the market, Kavita, which is the Pepsi kombucha, I mean, it's not coming into contact with that. So it's a very different process. I mean, my understanding is they're basically adding the bacteria after, as opposed to culturing.
Yeah, I think that, different brands are brewing different ways. Some probiotic drinks that you'll find in the kombucha aisle are not really kombucha. They're not actually fermented. They might be a probiotic drink that's more of like a sour tasting soda with a supplement added, and the company may not be fermenting anything. But, people are making it all different kinds of ways. I think that what Health-Ade has really strived to do is create a living beverage that is somewhat disruptive to the beverage space. So, our food system, and especially packaged food, is really designed for processed and pasteurized and sterile foods. That's what it's designed for from a production standpoint and from a regulatory standpoint. And what Health-Ade has really strived to do is continue to maintain this authenticity and this kind of belief that living foods should hold a place in our diets, and that even if a company wants to make it on a large scale, we can still do that and kind of fight the good fight for the preservation of living foods, so that we can experience some regenerative health benefits to having access to, bacteria and yeasts that have been living in food systems for thousands of years. And I think that we've seen that in outside of kombucha too, just looking at the resurgence of kimchi and kefir and people making, artisan yogurts, and really getting back to the belief that bugs are good, if they're the right kind of bugs, if they're not pathogens, and that we can create a food system that has a place for these living things despite challenges.
Michael Pollan had his famous 3 things, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. He said if he added a 4th today, it would be eat a little bit of living foods every day. And it's really interesting because it sort of echoes of banning raw cheese in America in the early 2000s and the effort to make house-made salami in New York City restaurants without the health department shutting it down. So, quick additional question. You said you didn't know if the audience would know what kombucha was. Would you say nationwide kombucha awareness is at where? Early on the curve, late on the curve?
Early on the curve, for sure. I would say that if I had to guess, less than 10% of American households know what kombucha is, let alone drink it. Maybe 5% or less drink it. Wow. So it's new. And it is kind of this, new agey kind of product, but the irony in that is that it's thousands of years old, and that probably anyone with kind of roots in Southeast Asia, and no one really knows exactly where kombucha came from or the original culture, the SCOBY, but this has been a component of human diets for a long time, initially starting out for food preservation, just so that, you can eat safely without access to refrigeration.
Great. Dr. Robert Graham, who has been behind many of the culinary medicine initiatives in New York City, has a private practice, Fresh Med, in downtown Brooklyn Heights. I also want to ask you where we are on the curve of culinary medicine. You see medical schools teaching cooking. You see lots of chefs being invited to go cook in front of residents. And my understanding is chefs are still not getting a ton of nutrition training. We're still talking about, a dozen hours or less. How optimistic are you about culinary medicine in the New York City metro area?
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. I've traveled a lot recently, and it's good to come home to New York, to Brooklyn, to answer that particular question. Because you feel like this is the hub of something that's happening. And I think if we can do it here, as that song says, right? If you can do, there is a movement happening. And for the last 20 years, I've been trying to, and I think we're hearing the same thing, bringing back the future, right? And so what I always say is that I'm just a new messenger of an old story. 2,000 years ago, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, once said, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." And for the last 2,000 years, we've forgotten that. And I think the movement of culinary medicine is trying to bring that back. We've realized that the majority of our health problems in our country are reversible through what we call at FreshMed a food-first approach. We just have to start focusing on the power of food as medicine. I've had the great fortune of teaching doctors how to cook for the past 10 years at the Natural Gourmet Institute, which focuses on a more health supportive training, understanding the principles of sustainability, as well as education. And it's true, right, is that 25 hours of medical education is dedicated to nutrition, but yet 80% of diseases are caused by bad diets. And so I've tackled two of the biggest broken systems, right? The medical system, which is completely broken at this point, focuses on volume and disease management, not in prevention. And this broken food system, which has just gotten us sicker over the past, particularly 50 years, as foods become more processed. And so my goal is really trying to bring this new wave of education called culinary medicine, the intersection between culinary arts and the science of medicine, bringing both together into a new form of healthcare which I do believe is going to be the future because you all want it.
And really, the deck is kind of stacked against it. As we were talking about before, the incentives are not for prevention. The current insurance incentives are really just not set up around encouraging people to eat well and exercise. But the borough president, Eric Adams, the Brooklyn borough president, who was going to join this panel, he's going to join us at the end of the day. He has a really interesting pilot program that you know about. Can you tell us about it? So it's a $400,000 for plant-based nutritional intervention in Brooklyn?
Right, no, actually, so Eric Adams, I think he's the coolest, besides Raphael, if you're still here, person in an elected official. So he's in downtown Brooklyn, he's the borough president, and his story is compelling. He woke up one morning, tried to see his alarm clock, and couldn't read the time. At that point, he found out that he had severe diabetes, which obviously causes blindness, leading causes of amputations, and kidney disease. He made it his mission to work with Forks Over Knives to really put a plant-based approach back into healthcare. And he's had two major initiatives that I had the fortune of speaking at one. He's actually trying to engage the clergy of Brooklyn to be at the pulpit to talk to their communities about the power of food as medicine, particularly plant-based foods. The other one that you're alluding to is the one that he's piloted, and I think it's just started, at NYU. It is the first ever, I don't know if it's the first ever in New York City that focuses on plant-based foods as primary medicine. We still give out drugs, but you put a food first, similar to what we do at Fresh.
So more of a complementary, what we're calling a complementary
Yeah, a
approach.
complementary, but it's, food first.
It's food first. So this is great. I mean, I think we're lining up all the allies here. It's like farmers combating climate change by growing kernza and kombucha, drinkers, or kombucha growers preserving our right to non-pasteurized food, and then of course doctors being mobilized as a type of army here and nurses. So going down the line, Riana, Lynn, who's a serial food entrepreneur, she's a Chicago native but also has lived in New York. Can you tell us about your approach to developing foods? You're now on food products. You're now on your third company. Tell us about this company you're launching, but is health central to your mission? How do you see community health guiding you?
One of the reasons why my newest company, and sorry I've been losing my voice, is so exciting to me, I guess I should just start with my background. I was a biologist, also a technologist. I was building a lot of websites for labs. I was working at University of Chicago when I started my first company, a chain of juice bars that really took off in 2011 in Chicago. We were really one of the first to bring cold pressed juice to the Midwest. And so we grew tremendously fast in our first year, and I decided, one, because I had a bunch of organic bloggers coming knocking at my door asking us about transparency, but two, to kind of help our team build out some more insights into our supply chain. Started the early developments of my second company, Food Trace, which was acquired in 2016. And so I, as a biologist, wanted to go into and start my company on the side in graduate school into beverages because I saw that, one, there were mostly, I think the coin for food deserts was termed in Chicago, actually. There were tons of patches around Chicago that had just no idea of what some of the fruits and vegetables were that you would imagine most people understood. A lot of people still in Chicago haven't even tasted a mango. And, I thought that was something that I would set out to change. And so we were working to bring just fresh juice to more people. But Food Trace kind of really took off. My first company, Peel Juice Bars, are now family run. And that introduced me to a lot of understanding around the supply chain system as well as biodiversity. And so I was able to just jump into tech, spent a lot of time partnering with Google so that we could map more insights around supply chains and just understand how we could bring better food into food service industry. But at the time, I kind of lost my way with just being a biologist and thinking about health. And so 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, I sat down with my friend who is a co-founder of Journey Foods. We are still kind of in stealth mode. We have some announcements coming over the next couple of months. So if you go to our website, you may not find much, but I could tell you certainly more on this panel. He is a global scientist with Skittles. And I just looked at him one day, we were actually at brunch, and I told him, I think, working together, we could really change what it means to bring functional ingredients and health to these kind of microforms, these snack options, especially around sugars. And so we have 2 patents right now that we're working on. And my thought was, you wake up every day. I'm telling Andy this, the global scientist with Skittles, who's my co-founder of Journey Foods, to try to tell people that they're eating a blueberry, or at least, I think it was when he gave me a pack of a farm Skittles that they were trying out. Green apple and strawberry, and they try to come up with this farm flavors, really devaluing fruit as you have it. If you go read, there are a few books on tells the history of kind of fruits, candies, and snacks, and it's really crazy how marketing has taken over and devalued fruit over the past 140 years, and kind of really accelerated when Willy Wonka came out. And so we discussed, what it means to him to tell people and to name these new fruit items or snack items, Skittles, Lifesavers, these things, and tell people they have fruit in them, or at least market them that way. And so my idea was, how do we bring more biodiversity to items just like this, whether it's fruit snacks, candies, sugars, tapioca, kind of boba bubbles. And we've been working to bring data and insights so that we can scan through tens of thousands of species of plants and marine species, so that we can better develop these shelf-stable snack and sugar items. And the great thing for me is that we're working with several food scientists on the team. They make up half of our team now. To help discover how we can bring more functional foods to shelf-stable forms, but also it's really about accessibility at the end of the day, right? If we can't sell items or develop items for other companies that are not in a price range that are accessible for people that are already eating the items that we're trying to bring them off of, then you really are only solving the solution for a small amount of the communities. And so I'm very excited about Journey Foods and kind of bringing together my best experiences from my last company.
I know it's a little proprietary, but can you describe the product any more? It's not would you call it a savory snack? It's not like a sweet candy.
No, so we have 3 different complexes we're working on. We're working on functional sugars. We're working on new fruit snacks that include everything from spices and probiotics in a kind of a fruit-based form.
Made with actual fruit. Yeah.
Made of the base is actual fruit, but we have a patent around the plant-based gelatins that help lock in and amplify the nutrients in these kind of small cube-like forms. They're under about 3/8 of an inch for one of the first product lines. And then we're actually working on we've actually worked on a patent for tapioca pearls. So right now they have no nutritional benefit, but we're partnering with suppliers so that they can bring more functional kind of vitamin C complexes as well as other nutritional density to everyday snack items, everyday kind of microfoods that people don't even think about, but could still bring them a lot of benefits.
Microfoods, I like that term.
Thanks.
Well, we'll hear more about, hopefully hear more about Journey Foods. And last but not least, Chef Mike Anthony of Gramercy Tavern. Mike, you, like many chefs today, you have to be involved in your community. You have to be a community activist. Of all the things you do to help or better your community, is there one that kind of resonates with what we've been talking about in terms of public health or community health?
So working at a restaurant like Gramercy Tavern, over the years, Danny Meyer has made the case from his first restaurant on down through every business that he's created that he creates restaurants that are for their community. We've gone on to talk about how our involvement in the community is not giving back or an extracurricular activity, but it is part of the DNA of who we are, and I think why people come to work with us. you can imagine the demands on New York City restaurants is great, and it's a difficult process of kind of focusing our thoughts on how to listen carefully to interesting ideas, and that is why we're here, is to listen to interesting ideas, but also to use our resources and our time in a smart way. Restaurant does happen to be a little bit demanding in terms of time, but over the years I came to be familiar with an organization called God's Love We Deliver. Not a religious affiliation at all, but a beloved New York City organization that feeds people who are too sick to take care of themselves. The organization's origin started in the mid-'80s during the AIDS crisis, and since has branched out to address over 200 serious illnesses. And the organization feeds about 7,200 people or so a day in New York City. So not only is it a locally based organization, but its mission statement and mantra is food is medicine. So just listening to the conversation here today, we see that we're curious and adamant about addressing this issue from every angle. God's Love We Deliver, as a board member of God's Love We Deliver, I find myself in an interesting position to try to help to create awareness for what they do, and very specifically also try to pull closer our restaurant and food industry into their world. They have an amazing route and network system within New York City, especially in the fashion industry, but they've yet to kind of completely endear themselves with our world. The learning is reciprocal. So when we talk about how, what sorts of gifts and values we can bring from the restaurant industry to God's Love, we're also paying close attention to how they are generating medically tailored foods that has a lofty goal, and that is, at the end of the day, to reduce healthcare costs in the United States by demonstrating and funding clinical studies that show that people who benefit from their service of receiving medically tailored foods will reduce the number of readmissions to hospitals and impact overall healthcare costs in a positive way.
And are you helping them make it taste better? I mean, translate it into... first, I was going to ask if anything you're helping God's Love We Deliver with is actually showing up on Gramercy Tavern menus now. Like, maybe you found something that really worked with someone with celiac disease, and you said, oh, that actually could work for everyone.
Well, there's not quite such a direct correlation yet. But what we do see is there's in all of the work that we do that forwards this thinking of food as medicine, we need to see the tangible impact of that. In an organization like God's Love, you can imagine restaurant folks that are outside of their long and hectic days who are donating their time. 80% of the work that's done at God's Love is done by volunteers. But not only can we contribute in technical ways, but we see the impact on the community directly. So while we haven't seen those recipes show up on the menu at Gramercy Tavern, we are seeing a sensitivity. And you can imagine that, I've been the chef at Gramercy for 12 years now. I'm very proud of the evolution of that restaurant. But as a chef, we have to find this balance of, my job is to nurture a beloved New York City restaurant, which is largely based on hedonism. But throughout the 12 years of being the chef there, my goal has also been to show that that's not mutually exclusive with health and healthy foods. And little by little, I'm quite proud that the restaurant has been able to attract people who are thinking about those issues in a like-minded way, and I'm glad that the people that I work with are quite interested in learning and paying close attention to the groundbreaking ideas that are here.
Dr. Graham,
I'm
Dr.
looking
Graham,
for an internship.
you are.
Chef, yeah.
Do you see other partners like God's Love We Deliver in New York that are just natural fits for this? I mean, shouldn't City Harvest also be thinking of food as medicine? And I mean, there's been a big evolution in the food served at soup kitchens and food pantries to include more fresh, more vegetables, more culinary education. I mean, what are you seeing?
No, I think, what God's Love We Deliver is truly a unicorn in this space. Particularly, why it started and how it started in the 1980s, right? Really marginalized communities, trying to feed them, I think, what medicine really is, right? We have, I just want to do an experiment really quick, right? So think about this. You eat 3 meals a day, right? You can take out your pen and paper here. 3 meals a day, 365, multiply that times how many years you've been alive, right? For me, it's about 50,000 meals. How many of those meals are truly memorable? How many of those meals have you felt a health benefit from? Right? And I think what God Love We Deliver does is really provide these communities, and I love the fact, and this is one of my dreams, is to really make food as medicine, and food is medicine, by designing studies, because we've identified the fact that bad food equals bad health. But my colleagues, my doctor colleagues, not my chef colleagues, my doctor colleagues really push me all the time. It's never been studied. Now think about that, right? The study of giving someone healthy food to better their health has never been done in a randomized controlled trial. And we can argue the fact that should it be done, but the fact is insurance companies, which are unfortunately what we equate with healthcare, in fact, want those studies to be done for them to cover it. And this is why I think God's Love Delivers is such a special organization, is because it is funded privately, and it's done by donations. And I do challenge all other food vendors and food companies, like City Harvest and others, that really put the end user in mind. And ultimately, I'm in this game because I do feel that there is a movement that's happening. And ultimately, we want to live a healthier and happier lives. And by giving them the medicine through food, I think is going to be what we need to do, and put back medicines as third, fourth line of defense, and put food first again.
Can we talk a little bit about, yeah. One quick question from me. Different food delivery means, or drink delivery means, is there anything you're excited about? I mean, your product is totally new in terms of what I think of, but is your company looking at different serving size or anything to improve access, or just that you're excited about?
I'll jump in real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I think the most exciting thing for me, when I think about perennial wheatgrasses and kernza and other grains that are hugely beneficial for the soil, and really I don't think that we can have healthy humans if we don't have healthy soil. I think everything that we are as society ties us back to the ground where our food is grown. And so I think what I'm most excited about is kind of feel like a mom trying to sneak veggies into her kid's diet. Like, I want to put this kernza everywhere, and Cascadian Farm wants to put this kernza everywhere. So even if you don't know that what you are buying and eating is feeding our soil and improving the health of our soil, we're still going to give it to you. We're going to sneak it in there. And so I think that's the most exciting thing for me, is commercializing these grains and putting them in products that we serve to our consumers. So whether you are buying it because you know it's in there or not, the benefit is still the same.
Right, that bowl of cereal is still fighting climate change.
Yeah, I just wanted to say 2 things. So over the past year and a half, I've been advising and directing a venture investment firm that's lead investors in Farmer's Fridge as well as Beyond Meat in Chicago. And I really love how, food science has now caught up with the consumer experience. Like, we are finally really enjoying quality foods, quality science, and as well as data science that Farmer's Fridge is using has now finally caught up in matching the consumer experience. And I think that's really a part of the movement as well, and really helping move a lot of the mission along. And so I think there's just a lot more change to come over the next couple of years.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's take some questions from the audience. Anyone?
Raise your hand if you got one. I see the gentleman in the back. Sorry, I'll run.
And Farmer's Fridge, which Riana mentioned, it's sort of a smart, healthy vending machine. They were actually at the first Food Loves Tech, but they haven't been back since.
Right. Hi, folks. I have a question for Dr. Graham and Riana. So, prevention is better than cure. We all agree on that. But nutrigenomics, the field of using nutrition to cure disease, is incredibly unsexy. It's like putting iodine in salt and nasin in flour. So, functional foods, the only thing I've ever heard of that, like, that's really picking up and growing. Is that the only way we're using nutrition to kind of help cure disease, or what are your thoughts in that space?
I would say what Brian mentioned, Michael Pollan, 7 best words in the food movement. I would just add one more thing. Here's a little thing. I would say, and cook it. I think we just have to go back to our roots of protecting the soil, honoring the farmers, honoring real food. I think nutrigenomics is a fascinating field, and I think functional foods are a great conversation to have. But I think we have to go back to real food grown by real people on real farms with real soil. I think we've gotten too fast in terms of technology. I'm just talking about healthcare too, right? We rely so much on technology and testing, and we forget the special bond that the doctor and the patient have. And a lot of medicine doesn't happen with technology. It happens with real people sharing real emotions, real food together.
Yeah, I love nutrigenomics. I actually was studying that before I even launched my first company. And one thing that I look at when it comes to nutrigenomics and what's happening now is going back to your roots. So like understanding what your ancestors were eating just 400 years ago and how that just matters to your output and your wellness today. I think as we gather more data around ancestry and kind of DNA and biodiversity around the world and what really is a part of our background and history, our culinary history, I think it'll help us unlock the excitement around our food and exactly with what you said, connecting back to just everyday activities and bringing more health to our regimen.
If I can just jump in here too, I think one of the things that we as a kombucha company are constantly, I don't want to say fighting with because it's not that negative, but along the same lines is people call our customer service all the time like, well, how much kombucha should I take? And we're like, well, that's not the right way to talk about it because it's a food. It's a food like a carrot. Or would you go to your doctor and say, how many carrots should I take? No, you eat the amount that makes you feel good. And the same is true for kombucha. And I think one of the things Health-Ade we're frequently talking about is we're the champion. We consider ourselves a champion of real food because we're trying to re-educate people that it's not about building a diet of all these different nutrients and you have to have this much of this and this much of this and that these things are functional and these things are, indulgences or something. It's really about learning to eat again and using health as a way to be happy. And I think that if we kind of demedicalize, functional foods and thinking more about whole foods and real foods and like the history of food and why people like to gather around food, like that's really where we're all going to land at our healthiest diet and also a place where we get the most enjoyment.
I think we have time for another question. Yes?
Hi, thank you all for coming. I had a question on access and being equitable, like Kernza and kombucha. These are all wonderful, amazing products, and I'm super excited about them. But as you scale up and move forward, how can you make it that all levels of socioeconomic classes have access to these incredible foods, especially as we move forward?
I can give a brief answer. I think one of the things Health-Ade is a kombucha. Like I said, 10% or less of households know about kombucha and are drinking it. And Health-Ade is a premium product. It costs $4 a bottle, and most people aren't going to be buying a $4 beverage every day or regularly. So I think when we kind of think about this real food aspect, we're thinking about what can we do as a company that is just nourishing our community and kind of being responsible and making decisions that generate a safe and healthy food system for future generations. Because I think we talk a lot about healthy food now, but we, as a producer of anything, we're generating waste, we're generating packaging, we're using up valuable and finite resources. So what can we do as a company that is working in our community, which we do through a lot of school garden programs, and kind of looking at now that we've grown to a place where we can give back to our community, not in a trivial or kind of corporate responsibility way, but what can we do, like at the heart of our production practices that is sustainable, is generating community health, and basically, so we know that we're making good decisions that benefit people who aren't even going to have access to our product in the near future. But how can our product stand for something bigger that promotes real food among all communities, including those that are underserved?
I mean, I think when you and I were talking before about sourcing for large brands, ultimately it's that scale that allows a company to set, fairly low prices for the final product. And we're too early on with something like Kernza. I mean, I'm seeing companies do interesting things with serving size. I feel, servings are too big, and so if you reduce serving size, you can drop the price, and there's more sort of like multi-use packs of products that you used to only be able to buy a giant container of. So I think there's some of that innovation, but the reality again is that all the resources are put behind annual agriculture, not a perennial agriculture. And as soon as farmers are rewarded and actually paid for sequestering carbon, that will really change the economics of it. So, I mean, you put your finger on the biggest problem, obviously, and it's just a lot of chipping away at it. Yes.
Yeah, hi. This is Ravi here. I'm from India. So I would just like to ask how much of this food innovation is actually going to be tech-driven? Is it like a lot of going to be nutrigenomics and data sciences and stuff like that? Or is it going to be helping more the discovery of things that used to be in the past? Because we used to have had like very healthy past ancestral food/health systems, actually. Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I think the question is, where do you see technology helping the most? Is it like nutritional genomics, that sort of science? Is it more like innovative food manufacturing, or even just like an app that helps teach someone how to cook? I mean, is that sort of what you're getting at? Yeah.
Yeah, I do, in our practice, we explore the new frontier in technology in terms of testing. So going back to your point and addressing yours. So, the role of the microbiome and the ability to test what is in here, I consider it a garden, right? And so it's fed by things like prebiotics and probiotics and things like kombucha. So we're actually able to know exactly what is growing in us right now, right? Unfortunately, it requires you giving a sample at home, not in our office, where we identify what is going on inside your gut. With that understanding, we can actually do medically tailored meal plans, and someday, I hope, meal delivery, medically tailored food plans cooking for you. I think that's, in my area, in terms of healthcare, I think that is going to be the new frontier, evaluating the role of the microbiome in terms of technology by testing. But in terms of why we eat, I think that's another important thing, understanding how behavioral change, changing mindsets. That's why in our practice we have a clinical nutritionist to talk about the nitty-gritty about nutrition, but also a health coach that focuses on positive psychology, why we eat, how we eat, what's our relationship with food. I think an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approach is going to be the future, where we can leverage technology alongside testing to design the right food for your medical or health conditions.
Well, on that, I think we have to wrap up. Please go try Gramercy Tavern's foods next door, and Health-Ade, and Cascadian Farms and General Mills, and reach out to all of our panelists. Thank you so much.